Well, good morning, everybody. This is Barry Jones with SP History, and today we are beginning episode 5 of the Malcolm X series. And we left off yesterday discussing the break that Malcolm X made with the Nation of Islam, for all the reasons why, and how he now is looking sort of in a new direction. I mean, he starts his own mosque. But beyond that, he begins to hint at a change internally, whereby he's willing to at least entertain the thought of working with others to achieve his goals. He's met with, covertly, but he's met with Martin Luther King, somebody he ostracized earlier in his career. And he's entertaining the notion of alternative means by which he can accomplish his goals, alternative to violence, and that famous ballot or the bullet speech, which advocates a choice between the ballot or the bullet. So we're starting to see some glimmers of hope with respect to Malcolm X and his radical extreme views, especially with respect to violence and separation. He's starting to moderate and go in a slightly different direction. And I speculated, and this was my own view on this, but that if you don't have the death of his career with respect to the Nation of Islam, you don't have the birth of Malcolm X's uh, dispensation 3. You don't have the opportunity for a second conversion. Sometimes it takes the old dying off to make way for the new. And I really feel that to be true about Malcolm X. I'm going to quickly scan through my sources, the Shabazz Center, the National Archives, the FBI files in particular, the Netflix series I've discussed, Abdurrahman Muhammad, who was the source for a lot of the Netflix series, the website Democracy Now!, which if you get on YouTube and pull up their channel, there's a lot of stuff on there about Malcolm X. Dave Garrow, the resident expert with respect to FBI malfeasance and the COINTELPRO program and Bossy, et cetera, et cetera. Claiborne Carson compiled the relevant documents from the FBI Manning Parable. A lot of the information we're going to be dealing with today comes from Manning Parable and the reinvention of Malcolm X's life. Garrett Felber, we haven't really got into his stuff yet, but we will after the assassination. Dr. John Fox, the FBI historian, and then the two Hollywood productions, the movie or the documentary Four Died Trying, which again will be my last episode in this series. We'll be hitting on some of the source material from that. And then if you're interested in an overall view of this time period, this period piece is really good. This Godfather of Harlem. It's not a documentary. It's like a TV production, but it's really, really good. And I would say, judging, I've finished it now, and I would say a good 80% of it is factually accurate. 20% they take liberties, but a good bit of it is factually accurate. It's very, very informative. Okay, so we've been gunning for this moment ever since we started, and that is the third dispensation of Malcolm X. And we started to see a light at the end of the tunnel, the end of episode 4, where Malcolm's heart is being prepared for a change. I think prior to his issues and his problems with the Nation of Islam and the subsequent divorce between him and Elijah Muhammad, I don't think he would have been open to change. He was so adamant and stubborn and just entrenched in his views. But, he's lost everything. And we went through all that in episode 4. He's lost everything, yeah, including, it hasn't happened yet, but he's fixing to lose his own home. He's lost his pay, um, his home, his job, his status, everything, his relationships. He's just lost everything. So on April 13th, 1964, remember it was on April 8th, 5 days prior, he declared his break official from the Nation of Islam. 5 days later, as a practicing Muslim, he left the United States on a personal and spiritual journey through the Middle East and West Africa. Now, part of this has to do with his cultural heritage, which is why he's going to Africa. And part of it has to do with his religion. By the time he returned on May 21st, so he's gone about 5, 6 weeks, he had visited Egypt, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Ghana, Morocco, and Algeria. And in every one of the, here he is in America, ostracized everywhere he goes. People are talking about killing him. But in every one of these countries, he's treated like a foreign minister. They roll out the red carpet for him. He meets with the heads of their government like he's like a diplomat or something representing the United States government. In other words, he gets rock star treatment. Now, the FBI is on his tail, following close behind, conducting their round-the-clock surveillance on Malcolm X. What the FBI is transitioning from is an emphasis on Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, which they're going to continue to surveil them. But the wild card in all this is Malcolm X. They're curious which direction he's going to go. Towards the end of his tenure in the Nation of Islam, it was their view, according to the documents, that he was the one they were most worried about, especially because of his influence over Elijah Muhammad. They thought his radicalism, he had been radicalized, basically, and he was espousing violence, separation, all these things, confrontation with the white man. And they were afraid he was going to hold sway over Muhammad and convince him to exercise all these options. In the end, Elijah Muhammad listened to his family, listened to the leadership, which made up mostly of his family. And because of the money that they were trying to protect, the money flow, he did not listen to Malcolm X. He listened to the other side instead. So, in other words, he himself neutered the Nation of Islam. And it wasn't really a threat, because of his dependence on these donations and all these businesses. And he didn't want his income ever to be accountable or taxed. And so he's trying to stay out of the government's, focus. He doesn't want to arouse the attention of the FBI or the IRS. So it's pretty clear what direction the Nation of Islam is going. And it's not Malcolm X's direction. So they are not, especially with Malcolm X no longer a member, it doesn't seem to be a threat going forward. Elijah Muhammad has made his decision. He's made his bed. He's more interested in preserving the money train than he is fighting the cause. But here we still have this wild card, Malcolm X, and now he's going around the world and he's visiting with all these foreign leaders. And so they're going to be playing very close tabs on Malcolm X going forward from this point forward. The change that I want to discuss, other than the change in direction, which it will be an outcome of the internal change inside of Malcolm X, happens when he goes to Saudi Arabia. And this is where he experiences, I call it a second conversion. He called it an epiphany. It's the Hajj. And of course, if you're familiar with the Muslim faith, you know that one of the 5 pillars of Islam is to carry out sometime in your lifetime this Hajj. It's a pilgrimage to the holy city, Mecca. And this is his Yeah, might as well. He's got nothing going on back home. So he picks this time to go to Mecca. And he says later, quote, in my 39 years on this earth, he would, this is in his autobiography, quote, the holy city of Mecca had been the first time I had ever stood before the creator of all and felt like a complete human being. I think what he's trying to say is he experienced healing. Remember, we've talked about the first and second dispensations of Malcolm X and how they were motivated from the same place. They were the pursuits were different. Dispensation one, he was pursuing a life of crime. Dispensation two, he's pursuing the Nation of Islam and all things related to it. But the message, but the heart that was driving both of those dispensations was the same. It was anger, it was bitterness, uh, it was a desire for revenge, it was a hate for the white man, on and on and on. And so that's what flowed from him. It made him very successful, made him a rising star in the Nation of Islam. Uh, but in the end, it crashed and burned. And that's what hate does. That's what uh, unforgiveness does. And bitterness. It destroys you, right? It doesn't destroy your enemies, it destroys you. And he is standing there at this point in his life, looking at what appears anyway on the outside, looking at to be a destroyed career, destroyed life, destroyed relationships, just everything's just destroyed. And truth be told, he brought it on himself. And so this pilgrimage, this Hajj to Mecca, uh, lays bare, it sort of has a way of, if any of you have been on any sort of religious journey yourself, when you get alone with your God, oftentimes the lies that you've told yourself, the framework of your life that you've constructed so as to avoid facing the truth. Uh, we all lie to ourselves, we all deceive ourselves, but it all gets laid bare before your God. And you can't lie. You know the truth, and it's that moment where you're confronted with the truth that you have a decision to make. Deny it and continue on and destroy your life even further, or make a change. And Malcolm X decides to make a change. And it's a pretty dramatic change. But it took this trip, it took this pilgrimage, this religious, it was born out of religion. Very similar, ironically, to what Elijah Muhammad, when he originally began the Nation of Islam, what he was trying to create. Now he got corrupted. The money corrupted him, the sex corrupted him, the attention, the glory, the status, whatever. He got hooked on it. But we've already learned that Malcolm X is wired a little different. He's a true believer. Whatever he believes in, he's going to be authentically 100% behind it. And he's not motivated by the same things the rest, some of his uh, people that he'd been around with and following, whatever. He's not motivated by the same things. Anyway, this experience changed his entire worldview. Gone was the belief that the white person has no redemptive qualities. It's just exclusively evil. He renounced that. Gone was the call for black separatism. He renounced that as well. Uh, he's kind of coming over to the dark side, isn't he? You think about what Martin Luther King stands for. He's coming over closer and closer to Martin Luther King. Remember, King wanted to integrate within the white community. He wasn't trying to separate from it. And you don't integrate within the white community if you think it's exclusively evil. His voyage to Mecca also helped him discover that Islam could achieve unity as well as self-respect. In other words, self-healing is great, but it could also achieve unity amongst people of different cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, uh, et cetera, economic backgrounds. He says, quote, because of the spiritual rebirth, which I was blessed to undergo as a result of pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, I no longer subscribe to sweeping indictments of any one race. This is big. This is a transformative moment in Malcolm X's life. Now, in the midst of all that, he still has his problems. On May 4th, 64, on a return trip to LA for some publicity events, his car was chased down the city street, and the person who was chasing his car, jerked the back door open where Malcolm X was sitting, and he had a gun. And the only reason he didn't get a shot off is because Malcolm's driver hit the gas, and the door hit the guy, knocked him down. But it showed that this temporary reprieve while he's abroad, he's still going to have to face his enemies when he comes back home. And he was only home for a short period, then he went back and for another 3 weeks or so before he returns home again. So that was like a kind of just a reminder in case he forgot. You get on these spiritual highs and you're being treated like royalty in all these countries. And you relax a little bit, you take a breath and you think, you exhale. You've been on edge for the last year. It's been a terrible year. And now you're getting this kind of treatment and you're experiencing this kind of healing and you're having this sort of a transformative personal epiphany from a religious standpoint, but also from your political beliefs and things of that nature. Everything has changed. Nothing is the same anymore in his heart and his mind. But then he comes back to LA and he gets chased down the city street with a guy with a gun. No doubt the guy intended to shoot him with it. Anyway, so he's gone again for another 3 weeks. He returns to the United States on May 21st, 1964. And in this return, which was met, he was met at the airport and people knew he was returning. Here he is, the most controversial black leader in U.S. history. And by controversial, I mean, Martin Luther King was controversial. Fred Hampton was controversial. Stokely Carmichael was controversial. But Malcolm X was controversial to another degree because of his message and the intensity of his message, which was such a hard edge to it. And the military aspect of, when he was in charge or second in charge of the Nation of Islam, they were creating this paramilitary organization called the Fruits of Islam that were supposed to carry out his message. They didn't, but that was the thinking, especially amongst the white community. So he's a pretty controversial figure. Black power, I hate white man, critical of everybody, including people on his own side, Martin Luther King, critical of JFK, he was just a wild, loose cannon before. And now he returns from this pilgrimage. He's a completely changed man. He's proclaiming at the airport, quote, I am a Muslim. Islam is my religion. It's my intention to try and spread Orthodox Islam amongst the Afro-American community and people, period, in this country because it's the only thing that creates brotherhood. All right, some things here that stand out. Obviously, he is now, there's this renewed focus on religion, which before he got off into the political off-ramp, so to speak, and that was the direction he was going. Now it's all about, he's coming back to the roots of religion, of Islam. Why? Because he's trying to create brotherhood. Oh, this is huge. The white press is used to him talking about separation, a black separatist movement, black power, extinguishing the white race. Here he is saying, I want to create brotherhood. That's why I'm going to focus on religion. It's the only thing that creates brotherhood. So he's not talking about separation. He's not talking about the evils of the white man. He's talking about trying to create brotherhood, unity, brotherhood. His new vision is trying to stitch together some measure of unity and brotherhood between the races. This is not the same message of the past, Malcolm X, nor is it even the same message of the current Nation of Islam. Though the Nation of Islam doesn't stand up and do anything when they have opportunities, they still have this pretty extreme message. And, it seemed like they fit hand in glove, the extreme message and the extreme messenger. But it turned out the extreme messenger was too extreme for the Nation of Islam, so they booted him out. But they still have this extreme message, they just don't back it up. But now the extreme messenger has turned, in their view, soft. And he's talked about unity and brotherhood. His daughter even noticed it, talked about it. Later, she said, quote, gradually, my father saw true Islam, Asians, Europeans, Africans, all sitting together. That's people of all races, right? Europeans are white, Africans are black, Asians, all sitting together. He could actually sit with these people and not feel resentment. He made his Hajj and it changed his life completely. He finally saw what the world was. It wasn't just a civil rights issue between blacks and whites in America. It was now a human rights issue. So this is the change that has happened in Malcolm X. He's no longer seeing himself as a civil rights crusader. He sees himself as a human rights crusader, which includes all races. When he was asked to describe his Hajj experience, he said, quote, there were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans, but we were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and the non-white. In other words, it opened his eyes to something that was possible he didn't think was possible before, and really, quite frankly, had no desire to even try. But because of what he experienced in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, he now feels like that's the direction he wants to go. Unity, brotherhood amongst all the races. I hope that I have painted a picture here in episodes 1 through 4, talk about dispensations 1 and 2, that help you understand just how big this moment is in Malcolm X's life. And of course, everyone who interacts with him, if they knew him before, or if they'd ever heard him before, which you'd have to be living in a hole not to have heard him before, been exposed to him before, to hear this new Malcolm X, it's clear something big has happened in his life. When he was asked if his new message of love and brotherhood contradicted his earlier message of hating hard, Malcolm X replied, quote, I never did hate anybody hard, which isn't entirely true. He is contradicting himself, but that's okay. It's called growth. When you go through a religious experience like this, you're going to be changed. You're going to be different. You're going to view the world differently. And that's what he's doing. And if those words were spoken by anybody else other than Malcolm X, for example, if Martin Luther King said it, everybody would just like, well, yeah, he doesn't hate anybody. But this was bombshell stuff coming from Malcolm X. There was a headline in newspapers essentially saying, the priest of black pride no longer hates the white folks. And, juxtapose that against the old headlines that said that he was the man who hates whites. So it's clear that this trip has changed him. And everything going forward from this point on is the real Malcolm X that historically gets lost. And I've mentioned this several times. All of what I knew about Malcolm X was the stereotype based on dispensation 1 and 2 of who he was as a person. I knew nothing about this Hajj and this second conversion and the last year of his life. I knew nothing about it. And yet this is who he changed into, and this is who he became. This is the direction he was heading. And this is, ironically, when he becomes a threat to the United States government. He would, on all his bomb throwing days, when he was a flamethrower, when he was advocating all these radical things, he was just this extremist. He wasn't a threat. He was surveilled. They kept an eye on him, but they didn't do anything to him until he comes back preaching unity and brotherhood. And I think you'll see as we go through this episode today why all of a sudden he becomes a threat. One of the things that really changed in Malcolm X's approach, it's kind of like a BC AD thing with Jesus. You had before the death, after the death. Time is measured differently. Well, in Malcolm X's before life, he wasn't really concerned about the rest of the world and other countries and African Americans and other parts of the world, et cetera, et cetera. He was mainly concerned with what was going on here in the United States. But now he realizes that they have areas of commonality, that there are similarities there that need to be straightened out internationally. And if you could straighten out things internationally or develop some sort of brotherhood amongst Africans that are in Africa or other parts of the world, uh, you, your effectiveness grows. You become stronger. And instead of having this local obsession with the United States, he begins to broaden his horizons and look at the, the state of race relations around the world. He said, as long as we think that we should get Mississippi straightened out before we worried about the Congo, you'll never get Mississippi straightened out. In other words, he believes we're all connected, and that race relations or human rights issues in the Congo are as important as human rights issues here in the United States. And to focus on one at the exclusion of the other is fruitless. You're not going to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So all of a sudden, when he comes back, he's going to have a broader scope. He's going to be, instead of zeroed in on here, what's going on here in the United States, he's going to be looking at the international scene. And soon after his return, he gave a speech drawing parallels between European colonial rule and institutional racism in the United States. Oh, he's touching the third rail here. He's talking about how this racism in the United States was born out of this colonialism, this imperialism that started in Europe that eventually made it across the United States, whereby one people group considers itself to be superior to other people groups and goes in and subjugates or subverts and, exploits and on to the point where you eventually own them and make slaves out of people. And it creates this, I could go on a real side trail here, a rabbit trail talking about uh, social Darwinism and the belief that some people groups are superior to others. It started in Germany, obviously, where Darwin was from, but it quickly made its way across the ocean to the United States. This idea that some groups, it's just like Darwinism itself, which says that the stronger species survive, the weaker ones die out. Social Darwinism says basically that there are some groups of people that are elites, that are superior to others, and uh, they are, and it's like the fittest survive, right? And because of that, you have this pyramid where at the top you have the elites and the superior races, and at the bottom you have everybody else. And there was actually a feeling that God ordained that. And if you don't agree with that, then your argument is with God. It's not with man, because he set it up that way. Some races are just superior to others. And so it's okay to go in and subjugate foreign countries. It's okay to go in and subvert their governments and steal all their resources. It's okay to make slaves out of them. It's okay to treat them less than. It's even okay when they eventually this becomes the baseline model, or the eugenics flows from this eventually, whereby you try to uh, create a super race, right, by breeding strong with strong and eliminating the weak, uh, allowing them to become extinct, so to speak, and creating a super race. You can this is you can really go off in a million directions here. But this is what he is saying. He's basically saying this colonial rule, this imperialist mindset, this Darwin Darwinism, this social Darwinism. It says that some races are superior to others. Thus, it's okay to exploit them, take advantage of them. It came out of Europe, but it is the basis upon which the Americans enslaved Africans. And so he makes a comparison to the police in Harlem were not much different than the French were in Algeria, like an occupying army. It's the same mindset. And so you can see where he is, his mind has expanded. And as a result of this trip, he is saying what has been his experience in America, starting off with his father's death and his mom being sent to an institution, that kind of institutionalized racism, all the way forward to Harlem and what he saw in LA with Ronald Stokes being killed by the white police. All these things that he thought were unique to America, he realizes they're not unique. They came from somewhere. They came from Europe. And this imperialism, this colonialism that started there, creating these vast empires, British Empire, the French Empire, all these, it's the same. It's this comes from the same mindset. And so all of a sudden now he is, for the first time, according to Manning Parable, uh, making the connection between racial oppression and capitalism. If you look at all these, if you look at imperialism, what it was about uh, enriching yourself. This country over here, these indigenous peoples, they have access to sugar cane. And we don't grow sugar cane in our country. We need their sugar cane. So let's uh, create a pretext upon which we can go take their sugar cane, take control of their country, take their sugar cane. This country might have gold. Country might have silver. This country has good agriculture. You look at Britain, for example. Britain is an island nation. It's on a rock. They can't even grow enough food to feed their own people. So food is an issue. So you want to create this empire by which you can enrich Britain. So you control these faraway places like India, and you want the spices from the Far East, and you want the gold and the silver, and you want the sugar, and the mineral deposits, and all the trade. I mean, it's about enriching yourself. And mercantilism was this belief that your country is as powerful as it is rich. So you enrich your country, you enrich your country, you enrich your country, and in essence, you're empowering your country. And the richest country with the most control over the rest of the world, the biggest empire, is the most powerful country, the most powerful empire. And that's capitalism, right? It's all about, uh, it's about getting rich. In essence, that's what capitalism is. So what he is saying, or making the connection, is that the more capitalist a country is, probably the more racist it is, because they, in order to get rich, are going to have to exploit other people groups, and they're going to have to come up with rationalizations that make it okay. And the rationalization was social Darwinism, which is just a fancy word saying racism. That's really what it is. So uh, he's saying if you're this is where he's, there's really only three types of countries. You're either communist, socialist, or capitalist. So he's drawing the connection between racism and capitalism. So now he's taking a hard look at the other two, saying, might they not be preferable to capitalism, at least as far as race relations and human rights are concerned? He even said, quote, African Americans should emulate the Chinese and Cuban revolutions, which are both socialist. All the countries that are emerging today from under colonialism are turning towards socialism. I don't think it's an accident. And it's not an accident in Malcolm X's own mind, heart and mind, that he is also turning to socialism. He is saying, I've seen what capitalism produces. It produces terrible injustice and inequality amongst the races because the ones that have the power, the ones that have the wealth and want more power, want more wealth, put down the other races in order to take what they want and to become more powerful, more wealthy. And in justifying that, they use these fancy terms like Darwinism or social Darwinism or the divine right, right? Or uh, eugenics, right? It's all about power and money. That's really what it comes down to. And that's what capitalism is in essence. It's about gaining power, or gaining money and gaining power in the process. Socialism is where, in his view, theoretically, where everybody's sort of equal. The government, a third party comes in, distributes resources, makes everybody the same. There's not a big disparity between rich and poor. That's the theory anyway. Same thing with communism. Everybody's the same. Everybody's pitching in for the commune, for the larger group. So he is internally rejecting capitalism because of its exploitation of indigenous peoples, because of its terrible track record with regards to race relation, because of its clear abuse of human rights in order to get the gold, to get the silver, to get the sugar cane, to get the trade route, to get the spices. And he's saying there has to be a better way. And in his view, socialism is the better way. So this is where all of a sudden Malcolm X is taking a turn and now become rejecting the American system of capitalism and adopting a system that is decidedly un-American. And this is going to get the attention of the higher ups, clearly. He starts to, in his public comments, he starts to draw attention to what's going on in Cuba. Now, this is 64. If you followed my JFK series, you know that in 63, JFK was killed largely over the issue of Cuba. Okay. That's only been a year, not even a year. May 21st, 64, you're talking about, 6 months. 6 months ago, Kennedy was killed. And the Cuban situation was a big chunk of the reason why. And here he is now pointing to the revolution in Cuba as an example of what he thinks should be happening. When he talks about an ideal revolution, he says, it's the Cuban Revolution. He says, that's a revolution. They overturned the system. Revolution is in Asia. Revolution is in Africa. And the white man is screaming because he sees revolution now in Latin America. How do you think he'll react to you when you learn what a real revolution is? And so we already know that in 60, right after Fidel Castro took over power and came to address the United Nations in Harlem, he met with Fidel Castro. Here's pictures of their meeting where he offers him a place to stay at Hotel Teresa. Since Manhattan uptown folks wouldn't put him up, he put him up in Harlem. And that started a relationship in 60. But now, 4 years later, after having gone around the world, he is starting to look at the Cuban Revolution differently and say the socialist approach, which is Castro's approach, is the preferable approach when it comes to human rights, not capitalism. socialism. And of course, communism is just an extreme form of socialism. So he is taking, and of course, we know Castro is, I mean, to say, put it mildly, he's a socialist, but he's allied with our communist enemy, Soviet Union. Whew. So he is now allying himself, Malcolm X, with these boogeymen that we've created in the United States, down in Havana, Cuba, notably Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, people like that. Um, there is evidence, though it has not been corroborated, that he met on one of his, he went to Africa 4 different times, Malcolm X. On one of those trips, there is some evidence, both in Fidel Castro's and Che Guevara's writings in Cuba, but also from Malcolm X's own diary. It doesn't say, give a date or a time explicitly, but there is evidence, some evidence, that indirect evidence, that provides strong clues that while on one of these trips, he met with Che Guevara and he met with Fidel Castro. And it's not surprising, if that's true, that when he comes back in 64, after these trips to Africa and after this alleged meeting, that he starts talking up the Cuban Revolution, having just met with them. There is some indication that they even invited him to come to Cuba and participate. One of the things, one of our beefs with Fidel Castro is that he was trying to export revolution to other countries in Latin America. He was trying to export the Cuban Revolution to Nicaragua, to El Salvador, other places, Mexico possibly. And if he just keep to himself and leave all the rest of the countries alone, we might not have such a big issue with him. I don't believe that to be true, but that was one of the things that we were saying. Anyway, these revolutionary activities that are based in Havana, they were inviting him to come participate, to be part of their revolution. And Malcolm X even made subtle references to this invitation, to this activity in several of his speeches. So you can kind of see where this is going. You see a man who is looking for alliances now, rather than working on his own like he did prior. He's looking for alliances with other revolutionary movements because he now recognizes that this civil rights issue in America is really a human rights issue that is ever omnipresent all over the world. And it stems from this institutional racism, seems to stem from this capitalist mindset where it's all about getting richer and more powerful. And to do that, you have to step on people. You have to take advantage of indigenous people so you can exploit their resources. And then you come up with these rationalizations you call social Darwinism or eugenics or whatever. It's really all racism. And so he's understanding that civil rights is really a human rights issue, and it comes from this economic model, this greed mentality, which is the essence of capitalism, to get more money, to get more power at the expense of somebody. And so he's turning to socialism, and he's looking around the world at all the socialist revolutions, and there's one 90 miles right off our coast in Cuba, and he's beginning to gravitate in that direction. Meanwhile, he's talking about unity and brotherhood. He's not talking about black power. He's not talking about separation anymore. He's transformed from a confrontational black power isolationist to someone who is looking to make alliances with different races to establish this brotherhood, because he believed that this is the most promising or potentially promising way to create or achieve the equality that the African American community has been after. The other message wasn't working. It crashed and burned. Now, all of this new talk about unity and brotherhood is not because he has a new trust and belief in the goodness of the white race. It has nothing to do with that. It's about what will work. What I was doing was not working. Now I've gone through this religious transformation, and I realized that reaching out, forming alliances, working with, if need be, even the white man, stands a better chance. I stand a better chance of achieving that equality, addressing the human rights issue from a macro perspective, from a world perspective, understanding how capitalism has hurt human rights all around the world, not just here in America, and to advocate now for socialist revolutions in country after country in order to bring about this human rights change that is necessary. He's become political in a new way. Instead of advocating for violence and war and separation, his new political belief is forming alliances, working across the aisle with people you might disagree with prior, and now finding ways to work with those people. And of course, politically, he's getting into the economics and the history of capitalism and imperialism and colonialism. In the past, that wasn't even interesting. It never even crossed his mind. It was all about what's going on in the city streets of Harlem right now, or what's going on in the city streets of Mississippi right now. Now he's got a broader view. And this is where he becomes an enemy or a threat. He says in his autobiography, quote, "It's a time for martyrs now. And if I'm to be one, it will be in the cause of brotherhood. That's the only thing that can save this country." I mean, I told you he's a true believer. He was just as he was fully invested in the cause prior when he was advocating violence and extremism. He is now fully invested in the new cause, which is brotherhood. And if it costs him his life, it costs him his life. Remember, because he's a true believer, I got something in my mouth. Every time I talk, I feel it. What was I saying? I got it. Wearing this beard, sometimes I get hair in my mouth. So I get a loose hair. So anyway, he's a true believer. And whereas Elijah Muhammad had a chance in a Ronald Stokes situation to exercise his belief and to actually do what he'd been, carry out his message, but failed to do so because he was worried about his nest egg, his money. There's no such worry about Malcolm X. If he's willing to lay down his life, he says so. He's willing to be a martyr for the cause. It's just a different cause now than it was before. Now it's the overall goal is the same. But it's gotten bigger. The issue to him used to be so small. It was about civil rights in this urban area, civil rights in that urban area, civil rights in the United States. Now it's about human rights worldwide. And if you improve human rights, you're going to improve civil rights, right? If you treat all humans as equals, civil rights will improve in the process because obviously you're treating all people as equals now. So he's getting the cart before the horse. Actually, he's getting the horse before the cart. Before he's getting the cart before the horse. He's figured out the right order of things here. And of course, in order to achieve this, he's attacking something that our government doesn't want attacked. He's attacking the system. He's saying it's not about how you view a black person. It's about this capitalist system, because that is what you're using as an excuse to mistreat this black person, this person in Africa, or whatever. women, for example. So it's become an intellectual pursuit that is impacting his politics, but it all came from a religious awakening that happened in Saudi Arabia when he went to the holy city. And so this is a much deeper message from Malcolm X now than it was before. And of course, it's not coming from a place of rage and anger and hostility anymore, revenge, because he's talking about unity and brotherhood. So obviously, he's going to be viewed by his former Nation of Islam brethren as a traitor to the cause. Not only did he betray Elijah Muhammad personally, in their view, not only did he betray the Nation of Islam and quit the movement, he's now come back talking about unity and brotherhood and socialism. Socialism is anti-American. Unity and brotherhood contradicts the message of Nation of Islam, contradicts the messenger, Elijah Muhammad himself. So, like, who is this guy? Now, he claimed he still believed that Muhammad's separation solution was the best solution for African Americans, which I don't quite understand. You know, as he talks about all this unity and brotherhood, then in the middle of that, he says, "Well, I still believe what Elijah Muhammad teaches." But simultaneously, he's working on a new movement, OAAU, which we'll talk about here in a second. It's the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Afro-American. That's a big distinction from African American, which is the the black folks that are here in America. He is now advocating a combined approach between the Africans abroad with the African Americans here, working together to achieve this new human rights equilibrium, this new approach. It's working together. It's unity and brotherhood approach. He says, "I'm committed to working with, quote, whoever, whenever, and however I possibly can in the future." So that's why he forms this new OAAU. The Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which he started when he quit the Nation of Islam, was essentially a replacement for the Nation of Islam. Then he goes on his Hajj. He has this religious awakening. He realizes this is a worldwide movement, a worldwide issue of human rights, not just an American civil rights issue. And in order to link American Africans with African Africans, he creates, when he comes back, this OAAU to work together for this same human rights endeavor. And of course, this is just an anathema to these Nation of Islam folks, and they think he's lost he's lost it. What's happening is Malcolm X is transitioning from a American leader of a civil rights movement, a splinter group within the civil rights movement. It's not even the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King owns that distinction, right? He's the overall leader of the civil rights movement. Most people would say that. Malcolm X was the second in command of a splinter group, a splinter civil rights movement here in the United States. That was the old Malcolm X. The new Malcolm X is now becoming a world leader. He's meeting with all these world leaders on his trips abroad. He's recognized this is a human rights issue, not a civil rights issue unique to America. This is something that is pushed out of Europe first. That's where it originated, with this imperialist mindset, this colonial mindset, to go out and colonize all these weaker, smaller countries, these indigenous peoples. And the justification was, well, social Darwinism. We're there's the fit. We're the fittest in society, and these are the least fit. So we deserve to be in charge, and they deserve for us to be in charge because they're not as fit as we are. And that mindset is born out of this capitalist greed to get rich, and its essence to get powerful. mercantilism. So he realizes the root of the human rights abuses is not uh, spiritual, like the Nation of Islam always tried to make it. It's economic. It's economic because economy equals money equals power. So you want to have the strongest economy so you can be the strongest nation. And capitalism plays right into that. It's all about greed. It's all about accumulating at the expense of somebody. So he is becoming a world leader that is attacking a system that has been long entrenched in Western Europe, made its way across the ocean here to America. And that is the source of all these human rights abuses. He said, quote, the Organization of Afro-American Unity shall include all people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere, no matter where they live. In essence, what it is saying, we need to seek some allies among the people who look something like we do. Why are the African Americans here in New York? Why are we working so hard to achieve something here in New York or in the United States and excluding people that could be our allies all around all these other places in the Western Hemisphere? Why don't we all work together? United we stand, divided we fall. This is a completely new message from Malcolm X, who used to be the most exclusionary person around, and now he's singing a different song from a different hymn book. So what you see here is, according to Delaney Cobb, who historian, so this is no longer the rabble-rouser riling up the disenfranchised Negroes in Detroit or LA or Harlem, right? Or Philadelphia. This is now a person who's ad hoc ambassador of Black America. His concerns are no longer just the NYPD. His concerns are now the State Department. This is a different cat now. And this is, remember now, what was J. Edgar Hoover so obsessively concerned about? He was concerned about a Black Messiah who could come and unite all these different splinter groups and become politically literate enough to attack the root causes of their problems. Here you see what's happening with Malcolm X. He is growing, he's like a plant that's outgrown the pot. He's outgrown the Nation of Islam. He's now becoming a world leader, sort of an ambassador for all Black people, no matter where they live. And he's not talking about civil rights in these urban centers anymore. He's talking about human rights and the systems that exploit people or abuse human rights. And this is across international boundaries. He's becoming a world leader right in front of our eyes. And it happened quick, but it took the death of the Nation of Islam in his life to clear the space, to clear the area, and declutter his mind, so to speak, so that he could go and accept this new Malcolm X, this new mission, this new journey that he's on. Peter Bailey said, Brother Malcolm understood very clearly that the U.S. at that time was portraying itself as the beacon of liberty and justice and equality, and that the movement that was going on in this country at that time was no longer to be just considered the civil rights movement. It should be considered the human rights movement. And he himself said, we feel that the problem of the Black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. Because it's a worldwide problem. America can't solve all the world's problems. This human rights issue transcends countries and boundaries. It's because this imperialist mindset, this colonial mindset, has permeated France, Germany, the United States, all these different countries, so that this desire to get rich and exploit people, just a byproduct of that view is human rights abuses, because you're going to have winners and losers. No matter as you get richer, as your country gets richer, somebody's getting poorer. You're taking it from somebody. And in order to justify that, you're going to have to come up with all these explanations why it's okay. And that's what we call racism. So that's the journey that Malcolm X is on. And it's putting him in league with America's enemies, such as the Cuban revolutionaries, Fidel Castro, Che Guevara. It's putting him in, and it's putting him at odds with the American system, which is capitalism. So you see, he is, and now that he's bringing it into international community, it's going to be, he's going to add, there's going to be an added element to this, and that is embarrassment. He's going to embarrass the United States by meeting with these international, these allies of his around the world, and talking about race relations or human rights abuses in America as they talk about the human rights abuses in their country, realizing, sort of equating their problems with ours. We like to put ourselves up like, oh, we're better than all these. And what he's saying is, no, we're not. We're just as bad. The United States has the same problems they have in Ghana at a different scale, but the same problems nonetheless. So he's airing our country's dirty laundry. And he's, as I said, allying himself with America's enemies, these socialist revolutionary types. And he's taking aim at our system, capitalism. This is all the new Malcolm X, all while he talks about unity and brotherhood. It's an amazing transformation. His base of support, it used to be Elijah Muhammad. Boy, he's outgrown that. Used to be the Nation of Islam itself. Now he's looking for support from newly independent African nations, which is why he was treated like such a celebrity when he went over there, because they don't view him. They don't have all the same intramural rivalries that they had here in the United States, the civil rights movement. Once he comes over to this new position, that this is a human rights issue, irregardless of national boundary, he finds friends in these newly independent African nations and comes away from this with the realization that if I can unite all the Black people of Africa and America against Western oppression, we stand a better chance working together of achieving equality than we do piecemealing it from country to country, and attacking not the root causes, but let's attack the root cause, which is capitalism, which is greed. That's why we see these racist tendencies, because it's all going back to money. And they have to in their minds, they have to somehow rationalize the mistreatment of a whole group of people so they can exploit their resources or their labor. And so they come up with social Darwinism or whatever. But the root cause is money. And it's the system, capitalism, which promotes that root cause. Anyway, I mentioned how the embarrassment of him airing the nation's dirty laundry. Essentially, what he's doing is bringing himself into the crosshairs of the American government by going abroad and exposing America's problems, talking about human rights abuses in America, exposing the hypocrisy of America, which we go to these countries and we talk about all these fancy sounding words, equality, justice, democracy. What he's doing while he's abroad is saying that's not like that. Let me tell you how it really is. And it was embarrassing to the American government. Of course, the American government's following him around. They're surveilling him. The FBI is right on his tail. So they're reporting back everything he's saying. They are reporting back everybody he's talking about, like Castro and Che Guevara and the Cuban revolutionaries. They're reporting back who he's meeting with. And what they see is an ever increasing danger from this new Malcolm X because he is now becoming, he used to be the second command of a splintered group here in the United States. We can deal with that. Now he's becoming an international phenom. He's his greatest defeat has become his greatest triumph, and he has just exploded on the scene and become this sensation. And he has figured it out intellectually. This is not about racism in Detroit. This is about a system that demands a racist approach so that you can achieve the wealth and power that you want. It's a systemic problem, and it goes all the way back to Western Europe. So, boy, he's attacking big issues now. He's not talking about the little stuff anymore. He's not talking about the LAPD. They're a symptom. All these things are symptoms. The root cause, in his view, is capitalism. So he is putting himself in league now with all these socialist revolutionaries. And the one that really gets the attention of the American government is what's going on in Cuba and his grabbing a hold of that socialist revolution as if it's the epitome of what a revolution should look like. Malcolm X said, quote, "They say that the most powerful bloc in the United Nations is the African Asian bloc. These are the poor nations, yet they carry more weight in this political body than the nations who have all the money. Why? No matter how wealthy America is, she only has one vote. You and I have to look at this and understand this. The ballot is as powerful as the bullet," using that same theme again. "At least they're both important. If you don't use the ballot, you're going to have to use the bullet." This is from that famous speech. Well, what he's saying here is if these African/Asian nations would stick together and vote in lockstep with one another because they have common interests, they can win in this international community called the United Nations because they have more votes. They represent more people. So this is a whole new approach. He is advocating international cooperation, alliances to fight these human rights abuses that he is calling out, which he believes comes from this capitalist mindset, this capitalist system. And he's glomming on to socialism as a preferable approach economically, at least with respect to human rights, because it removes the greed. Now, we all know whatever humans are involved in, you're going to have all the human impulses, including greed, no matter what system you use. We've all seen socialist countries that don't work because of greed. They violate their own theory. Communism, the same. So I'm not saying he's right. Okay, I'm not making an argument here. I'm just saying in his mind, this is the transition he's made. It used to be such a small little message born out of this anger and hatred that came from his experiences as a child. Now he's been healed from a religious standpoint. He went on his Hajj. He got the healing from his God, and he's no longer arguing from an angry heart a bitter heart. He's coming from another place, and it's intellectual. He's thinking through instead of just emotionally reacting to, he's thinking through what causes racism, what causes human rights abuses. Is it religious? He said, I don't think it is because I just came from a place where people from all different countries and races, and cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, the way they looked, everybody was different. We are all getting along. Um, Now, we all had the same religion, and that brought us together and united us as brothers. But what I think it is, I think it's this economic undergirding, this economic system, which all these colonial powers have in common. These imperial powers, they all have the same economic model, and it's based on the acquisition of wealth, which translates into power. And what's one of the outcomes of that? They mistreat people whom they consider less than, whom they consider to be uh, not fit or unfit. They steal their resources, they steal their minerals, they steal their assets. They mistreat them. They even steal them and make them into slaves. They used to. Now they mistreat them because it's still this idea that they're less than, they're unfit. Where did that come from? In his view, it's the root cause of that is capitalism. So what you start to see where Malcolm X is starting to become an enemy to the United States government is that he has converted, and I don't know if he actually came out and called himself a socialist or a communist, whatever, but he might as well because the the rhetoric is socialist, and he is espousing all the theoretical underpinnings of socialism, and he is allying himself with the socialist revolutionaries around the world. And he's advocating for systemic change to create a better world, at least as far as human rights are concerned. So this is the new message of Malcolm X, and it's coming from a place, it's not motivated by anger or bitterness anymore. It's now coming from an intellectual place. He's making an argument based on intellectualism, based on what he's learned, what he's observed, and he's advocating a certain strategy to combat this. And this threatens some people in Washington. It's obviously a message that's not going to be received well by the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, all his former colleagues. But his audience is so much bigger than that now. It's almost like he could care less what the Nation of Islam thinks. He could care less about Elijah Muhammad. They're a flea on the butt, like a speck on the butt of humanity, so to speak. But the bigger issue now is about international coalitions, international agreements, alliances, working together, black men here in America, along with black men in Africa and anywhere else in the world, to fight for an agenda of equality, to fight against the system of greed, power that abuses humans across the globe. So it's a completely new message, and it's going to put him in a totally different stratosphere when it comes to threat levels within the FBI, within the United States government. They're going to view him completely different now. And there's still going to be, as we go into the next episode, there's still going to be some issues with the Nation of Islam, but they're sort of left in the rear view mirror, so to speak. Malcolm X is kind of moving, his new vision is taking him right into the crosshairs of the United States government. He's been spit up, spit out by the Nation of Islam. But instead of running off and hiding and disappearing from worldview and off the face of the earth. He's come back bigger and better and more dangerous. Okay, that's episode 5. I hope I did a good job explaining that. Um, I'm trying hard to present a different side of Malcolm X than what the stereotype is. This angry guy running around loose cannon, because in his last year, he was decidedly not any of that. And that's when he became a threat. That's when they had to take him out. All right, that's enough for today. Hope everybody has a wonderful, blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.